Hello everyone, this is Jaycee's blog. I'm an English teacher currently specializing in Cambridge English B2, C1, and C2 exams. And today I would like to give a summary of a marvelous novel, An American Tragedy by Theodore Dreiser, that I really enjoyed. Just an important notice, this video contains a spoiler. So if you haven't read the book yet, it would be a better idea to stream this video once you have done it. So, first I'd like to talk about the plot. Set in the 1920s America, the book features the protagonist Clyde Griffiths, a young boy who was born to fanatically religious parents in a poor family. As a child, he and his siblings roamed the streets with their parents to help them in their missionary work. Clyde went through deprivations from simple comforts, including education, and he was also bullied by his peers. His views of life were utterly limited by the stringent religious dogmas his parents preached. While he resented this, he was lacking in practical life skills mainly because of his parents' limited views of life. As a child, he had to do menial jobs to support his family. Once he gets the position of a bellboy in the local luxurious hotel, he mingles with youth of suspicious behavior and is introduced to debauchery. He has become increasingly drawn to luxuries and believes that if he wears nice clothes and behaves in a way that rich people do, he will gain a social position. His sister, Esther, soon elopes with a man, becomes pregnant, and is soon abandoned by her lover. This event foreshadows a similar situation later in the book. Meanwhile, Clyde is hanging around with manipulative Hortense, a vain girl who is using him for her own material benefit. She has Clyde on his tiptoes and compels him into spending what money he earns on her. As the plot continues, we see how Clyde's morality degrades. He even conceals how much he earns so as not to contribute in support of his family. Neither does he help his sister in her predicament. Clyde's life changes when his friend Sparks, driving Clyde, Hortense, and two other friends in his boss's car, runs over a child and flees from the police, crashing the car in a secluded place. Clyde escapes to Chicago, fearing a prosecution, and works in a club for the rich. There, by chance, he runs into his rich uncle Samuel Griffiths, who owns a collar and shirt factory. The choice of collar and shirt was not accidental. They symbolize a desire for a higher social position. Wishing to relate himself with his aunt's family, Clyde asks for a job position there. Soon he moves to Lycurgus, where his uncle's family lives. But he is greeted with a cold shoulder by the rich Griffiths, especially Clyde's cousin Gilbert Griffiths, who, being the heir of his father's wealth, regards him as a threat. Gilbert places him at a menial task in the basement. Back in the past, Clyde Griffiths' grandfather bestowed all his possessions to Samuel Griffiths, leaving almost nothing for Clyde's father. So Samuel Griffiths, feeling a sense of guilt, promotes Clyde to the position of a department head where he earns just enough to cover his costs. As months pass by, Clyde sees no interest from the rich Griffiths family to include him in their circles. However, neither does he want to mingle with the lower class. So he feels utterly lonely and despondent there. Soon, despite Gilbert's warnings against having any affairs with factory girls whatsoever, he falls for Roberta, a poor and innocent factory girl, and they start meeting clandestinely. After a while, a socialite girl, Sandra Finchley, the daughter of the owner of another family in Lycurgus, takes interest in Clyde. He regards her as an emissary of high sphere and is again filled with hopes for getting a place under the sun. Sandra, in fact, is using him as a toy boy and an instrument to get her back at Gilbert for ignoring her. She uses baby language to talk to Clyde, which is so condescending for a man. However, even then he swallows his pride and clutches at her. His hopes for a bright future are marred by the news of Roberta's pregnancy. While Roberta is dejected and plagued by her dooming disgrace, Clyde is being increasingly involved in Saunders' upper class society using his charm. He is becoming more and more estranged from Roberta, and the latter, feeling this, consents to make an abortion. They turn to people and try medicine that give no result. Roberta, wishing to save her and her future baby's honor, begs Clyde to marry her and then to drift apart. For Clyde, that would mean abandoning the factory and his ties with the elite society of Lycurgus, so he denies the possibility of ever marrying her. Once Roberta sees no action from him, she is forced to reveal her condition and give away their secret. At this point, Clyde plots a murder. He takes Roberta to a distant lake where he strikes her and drowns her. However, so naive person he is that he even fails to conceal his traces. He is immediately caught afterwards and brought to court. Initially, the detective doesn't believe that he is a murderer, so obvious the traces lead to him. Then we have the long and tedious trial, whereupon all the evidence confirm his guilt. However, even then, Clyde refuses to accept it, and he is called a moral and mental coward. He is ultimately sentenced to death. When the whole society is against him, his mother is unequivocally devoted to him, although hesitant about the innocence he claims. In futile attempts, she tries to canvass support for her son and save him from the death penalty. A most positive outcome would be to get him away with life sentence, which, as I think, could hardly be considered a better option. However, his mother fails to raise enough money for Clyde's second trial, and ultimately Clyde is executed on the electric chair. In the end scene, just like as the beginning of the book, Clyde's mother is preaching in the streets, carrying along Russell, Estes' illegitimate son, as if repeating the vicious cycle. An American Tragedy reflects the overwhelming atmosphere of the roaring 20th America, a period of dramatical social and political change which swept many Americans into an affluent but an unfamiliar consumer society. All throughout the book, we witness Clyde's deep immaturity and dreaminess that might be, as I said, resulted by gaps of the upbringing that he got from his parents. Only at the very end do we see Clyde finally accepting his guilt and begging God for salvation of his soul. To make up for his deprivations, he strived for comforts that the rich enjoyed. However, he wanted to get them in an easy way, ignoring conscientiousness and hard work, going way past the point of moral rectitude, which ultimately led him to his doom. Obviously, he went too far in his aspirations, and I was thinking if he had grown up in a better family, things would have been the other way. I still have this impression that regardless of the life story, his life story, Clyde was egotistic by nature, and this feature would have still made itself felt in other circumstances. It begs the question, however, how far he would be prepared to go had the circumstances or his upbringing been different. Although we condemn Clyde for the murder most of all, we cannot help feel a little bit of pity for him. What is even more tragical, in my view, is that even hours before his death sentence, he sees no reason to speak heart to heart with his own mother and confess his guilt to her, for he is convinced that she will not understand the earthly problems he faced, so cut out from the reality she, like her father, were. As for my impressions, I greatly enjoyed the monologues, dialogues, and the narration of events. They are very realistic, and this makes it easy to be inside a story. The narrative structure is simple, and the book is an easy read. I stayed up late, and I was literally deep drifted into the book. My main reservation might be the fact that the storyline was rather dragged, and the same thoughts were repeated over and over again. I wouldn't really say that the novel keeps you in suspense. The events are quite predictable. The illustration on this particular edition, and the title really help define the plot, namely that it is about an American dream of living in the lap of luxury. Also, the illustration of a boat ride hints on the culmination of the tragedy itself. But curiosity is aroused by the smart use of foreshadowing that we encounter all throughout the book. I started off reading with the introduction part, wherein the game is given away. Nevertheless, so realistic is the narrative prose that I was compelled by the book. In fact, as I see it, however masterful the narrative prose is, I guess we give preference to stories that resonate with us. If, like me, you are into stories about the corruption of a personality in the fashion of Dorian Gray, for example, then you might enjoy an American tragedy. It leaves the readers with a great deal to think about the vicissitudes of life.